Affairs editor Philip Tell is here to make sense of it all, because it is pretty complicated, isn't it?
I think that's an understatement, Laura. And making sense of it all, I think even many of the MPs in there don't know what's going on either.
But Boris Johnson is someone who has really suffered over the past 2 days because his strategy seems to be backfiring spectacularly right now, doesn't it?
Boris Johnson came in saying, remember that address outside number 10 Downing Street when he took up office on the 24th of July, saying that it was do or die. He was going to take Britain out of the European Union, whatever, on the 31st of October. And if that meant leaving without a deal, then Britain would leave without a deal. The only thing is that many MPs in the House of Commons don't see it that way. They say there is no mandate within the House of Commons for Britain to leave the EU without a deal. There's not support across the House for that, and there's not support across the country for it either. And when people voted back in 2016 for Britain to leave the EU, there was no mention of ever Britain leaving without a deal. So they're determined to stop that. So parliamentary recess ended yesterday or Tuesday. That was a day when Boris Johnson lost his one majority in the House of Commons with the defection of Philip Lee to the Liberal Democrats. And later in the day, he also lost the ability to keep control of the House of Commons, which has now been taken back by MPs today, and they are voting on this motion at the moment. These are the amendments that we are seeing that are being voted on with people going in and out of the lobby to vote on them, are amendments to a motion to stop him from taking Britain out of the EU with no deal on the 31st of October, unless he reached a deal with the EU at the EU summit next month on
a new deal.
On a new deal,
which everyone says is highly
MPs
unlikely.
vote for a no deal themselves, which is highly unlikely. Then they can go out on the 31st of October with no deal.
So essentially, though, what will this bill do other than delay all of the problems that they're having to deal with now until January 31st?
What the bill will do is give negotiators more time to find a deal, because there's a lot of suspicion about Boris Johnson and just how sincere he is in all of this. Boris Johnson's been saying, well, we're making progress with Brussels. He was questioned several times today at the dispatch box by Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, about just what that meant. Where are these negotiations going? Give us evidence of what you're doing. There was none. And then Jeremy Corbyn said to him, there was a leaked report, the Yellowhammer report, back in August about difficulties in obtaining food and medicine after Britain leaves with no deal. If that is the case on the 31st of October, would you publish those findings? Again, no reaction from Boris Johnson. So there's a feeling that Boris Johnson is just skimming over the facts and wants to push ahead with his plan to take Britain out of the EU without a deal at the end of October. And they say they are not having it. And that is why they're pushing ahead with this legislation today to delay that until the 31st of January to give them more time to negotiate a deal which will see Britain better off afterwards than leaving with no deal.
And the big question is, of course, will there be an early election?
Well, it's pretty definite there's going to be a general election at some point pretty soon, because Boris Johnson has got no majority in the House of Commons. So it's going to be virtually impossible for him to push any legislation through without the support of other members from other parties, which is going to be very hard for him. The Labour Party wants a general election, but they're saying they're not going to back the idea of a general election. A reminder that the Prime Minister, in order to call one, requires a 2/3 majority of MPs in the House of Commons. He won't get that if Labour refuse to back him until that legislation being discussed today is written into law. That's what they're saying. Once that's the case, they say they will back him for an election, which they say could take place in November, whereas the Prime Minister is saying that he would favour an election on the 15th of October.
Philip, thank you very much. Philip Tell there.